Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that loyalties will be tested as Bradley Smitty Smith is handed a mission unlike any he's faced before. In the wake of long-buried secrets stirring beneath the Richardson-Dupree enclave, Smitty, the steadfast husband and trusted family lieutenant, finds himself cast in the role of principal investigator into the mysterious past of his own wife, Martin Richardson. What begins as a routine probe soon unravels into a labyrinth of whispered transactions, hidden rendezvous, and the unsettling realization that the woman he married may harbor alliances darker than he ever imagined. When the envelope arrived at Smitty's desk sealed with the discreet emblem of the Richardson family crest, felt a prickle of unease. His office at Richardson & Sons, usually the sanctuary where numbers balanced and disputes resolved, suddenly felt claustrophobic. He broke the seal and withdrew a single sheet bearing typed instructions: corroborate the travel logs, audit the offshore accounts, and uncover any discrepancies in Martin's reported engagements. Above all, maintain the utmost discretion. His heartbeat quickened as he read the final directive: proceed under the presumption of loyalty, but prepare for betrayal. Smitty leaned back in his chair, the polished wood pressing against his spine like a judgment. Martin had always been forthright about her career at an international trade advisory, her speeches to global forums, her late-night conference calls across time zones. Yet small anomalies had arisen over the past months, unexplained credit card charges in cities she claimed never to have visited, ambiguous notes in her planner marked only with cryptic initials, and hushed phone calls she ended abruptly when he drew near. He had chalked these up to the pressures of her position. After all, Martin's sphere often intersected with sensitive diplomatic channels. But now, faced with this mandate from the firm's executive board, he could no longer ignore the shadows gathering around her. That evening, Smitty confronted Martin at their shared home, just beyond the manicured gardens of the Richardson estate. She returned from her daily run in the waning light, ponytail swinging and wireless earbuds still clinging to her ears. The sight of her athletic form, so familiar, so trusted, should have calmed him, but instead it stoked the embers of his anxiety. He motioned her to sit at the kitchen island, where the envelope lay open, its contents spread before them like evidence in a criminal case. "Martin," he began, voice low, "I received this today. There are questions about your travel records, about your expenses." He watched as her brow knit in confusion, then hardened in hurt. "I didn't understand," she replied, voice trembling. "You know I travel for work. You know how my schedule is." Yet behind her defense, he detected a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps fear, perhaps guilt. He swallowed, steeling himself. "I need you to help me. I need transparency." Her silence filled the room like a gathering storm. "Finally," she sighed, folding her long fingers atop the letter. "I didn't expect this from you," she whispered. "From us." The words cut deeper than any accusation. Smitty's chest tightened. "This isn't personal, Martin. It's protocol." But even as he said it, he recognized the lie. Everything he was doing felt intensely personal. Over the next days, Smitty threw himself into the investigation with a grim determination. He accessed Martin's digital calendar, her meticulously color-coded appointments, and cross-referenced every entry with her airline itineraries and hotel invoices. He traced the routing numbers of her expense reimbursements, mapping them against shell corporations with innocuous names: Meridian Holdings, Silvergate Investments, Pacific Crest Solutions. Each corporate veneer concealed layers of anonymity that suggested money large, sums flowing through channels neither he nor the firm could immediately explain. He pored over these ledgers late into the night, the glow of his laptop screen casting shadows on his weary face. At 3 a.m, he discovered the first glaring anomaly: a wire transfer of $45,000 from an account registered in Martinique, labeled only as consulting fee, on a date when Martin claimed to be in Brussels for a trade summit. His brow furrowed, Had she flown clandestinely to the Caribbean? Or was this payment a testament to dealings beyond her publicly stated roles? The notes appended to the transfer cryptically referenced Project Orion, a codename absent from any of her briefing materials. Smitty confronted the ledger again and again, looking for patterns, for an explanation that could preserve the integrity of the woman he loved. He revisited every detail he could recall, the late-night phone calls with a man named Luke, whose voice he had only heard muffled through the back of the handset, the hastily canceled dinner reservations in New York that left him waiting alone in an empty bistro, the odd perfume he detected on her collar, exotic, unfamiliar, evocative of faraway ports. These recollections, once dismissed as the trappings of a high-powered executive's life, now took on a sinister hue. In his pursuit of truth, Smitty risked fracturing the very marriage he sought to protect. Martin sensed the shift in his demeanor, his distracted glances, his clipped questions, the way he hovered over his phone as though it might yield secrets if he stared long enough. One morning, she confronted him in their sunlit sitting room, pastel drapes drawn open to the dawning sky. "Bradley, you're scaring me," she said quietly, her voice cracked with worry. "What are you looking for?" He closed his laptop gently and reached for her hand, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "I'm looking for the real story," he said. "I need to know who you're working for and why you've kept this from me." His words hung between them, heavy as storm clouds. Martin's gaze flickered. She looked at him not as her partner, but almost as an adversary. "I thought you trusted me," she replied, its sting sharpened by his betrayal. Yet Smitty could not relent. He remembered the blood oath their grandparents made as they bound the two families together, sealing them with a vow of unwavering loyalty. Now, that oath felt like a noose around his neck. If Martin had indeed been involved in covert negotiations, perhaps with corporate rivals of Richardson and Sons, perhaps with political operatives seeking influence, Smitty's silence would implicate him by association. To protect his wife would be to imperil himself and the very firm that had become his second home. Driven by both love and duty, Smitty expanded his inquiry beyond digital records. He enlisted an old friend from the State Department, one with clearance to track passport stamps and intercept diplomatic pouches. Under the guise of routine vetting, he requested copies of Martin's diplomatic visa applications and her cleared diplomatic pouches manifest. When the sealed envelope arrived a week later, it bore news more confounding than the last. Martin had indeed made a diplomatic trip to Martinique, albeit not under official Richardson business. The trip had been sanctioned by a little-known Caribbean Economic Commission, ostensibly to advise on trade regulations. But the commission itself was under scrutiny for money laundering and arms trafficking allegations. The report included a name, Luc Desmarais, the same Luc who had called Martin at odd hours. He was listed as the commission's lead counsel, a lawyer with murky ties to offshore shell entities. Smitty's chest tightened as he digested the revelation. The commission's files suggested that Martin had played a pivotal role in negotiating tariff loopholes that benefited certain import-export firms rumored to be fronts for illicit operations. His mind reeled. Was his wife a willing accomplice? Or had she been duped into advising a legitimate-seeming body that concealed darker motives? Either answer threatened to undo the life they had built together. That night, Smitty found Martin in the study, poring over architectural blueprints for a family retreat. He closed the door behind him and laid the new dossier on her desk. Her eyes widened as she read the official cover sheet, International Commission on Caribbean Trade and Security. She turned the pages, absorbing every line. When she reached the summary of the investigation, her face paled. "I had no idea," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They never told me about the allegations." They acted as though it was routine regulatory advice. She looked up, tears brimming. "You have to believe me, Bradley. I thought I was helping our own firm secure new markets, strengthening our global ties. I never intended to partner with smugglers or traffickers." Her hand trembled as she pointed to a footnote, Project Orionme, codename for the feasibility study. Suddenly, every breadcrumb of evidence fell into place. The coded emails she'd sent late at night, the secretive tone she'd adopted when discussing expanding into the West Indies. Smitty felt torn between relief and betrayal. Relief that Martin's involvement had been unwitting, but betrayal at her secrecy. If she had been transparent from the start, he could have warned her away from such dubious entanglements. Instead, he had uncovered her connections piece by piece, each discovery a blow to his trust. He closed the dossier and faced her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice heavy with both anger and anguish. Her shoulders shook with fresh tears. "I didn't want to worry you," she admitted. "I thought I could manage it, that I could steer them away from anything illegal. And I was naively proud of what I thought was a major coup for our firm." She reached across the desk, seeking his hand. "I'm sorry. I should have come to you." Smitty stared at her outstretched hand, heart pounding. Never before had he felt the gulf between them stretch so wide. His vow to protect her now felt the weight of an impossible compromise, to defend the woman he loved, yet hold her accountable for unwittingly endangering them both. The silence settled between them like dust, each inhale a reminder that the ground beneath their marriage had shifted irreversibly. In the days that followed, Smitty faced the stark reality that his investigation could not conclude without exposing Martin's association with the Commission. He drafted an internal memo to the firm's partners, outlining the findings and recommending immediate suspension of Richardson and Sons' tentative agreements with the Caribbean Commission. He prepared his own statement to deliver to the board, ready to shoulder the fallout for both their sakes. But as he positioned himself to send the memo, his finger hovered over send and then froze. He realized that in reporting Martin's involvement, he would be betraying her confidence and broadcasting her mistakes to the very people whose judgments he feared most. The firm's board, known for its ruthlessness in matters of reputation, would not hesitate to sever ties with Martin and potentially with him, as complicit by marriage. Yet silence meant collusion, a compromise of the ethical standards Richardson and Sons prided itself on. That evening, Smitty returned home to find Martin seated at their dining room table, a single lamp casting her face in subdued light. On the table lay an open journal, her personal reflections on the Commission's work. She turned the pages as he entered, revealing entries that charted her growing unease, notes about late-night phone calls she didn't recognize, names she'd jotted down for later verification, and repeated self-affirmations that she would make sure everything stayed above board. She looked up as he approached. "I found these," he said softly, indicating the journal. "You were worried." She nodded, lips pressed. "I began to suspect they weren't who they said they were. I planned to dig deeper, then I got the call about Bill's latest crisis, and everything else fell apart." Her gaze flicked to the polished floor, and she sighed. "I should have told you sooner." Smitty closed the distance between them, his anger tempered by empathy for her burden. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together," he said. "But from now on, no more secrets. We navigate the fallout side by side." For a moment, hope flickered, a fragile truce forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Yet even as they clasped hands, the shadows of uncertainty lingered. Smitty knew that Martin's journal was but one piece of the puzzle. The Commission's investigations were ongoing. The stakes would only rise as hidden alliances surfaced. And though they had pledged unity, the question remained, could their marriage survive the unraveling of truths neither of them fully understood? Late that night, Smitty sat alone in their study, the journal before him and the unsent memo blinking on his laptop screen. He stared at the blinking cursor, heart torn between loyalty and duty. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, silence broken only by the distant hum of city life. In the hush, he made his choice, but the reverberations of that decision would echo far beyond the confines of their home, shaping the destinies of all entwined in the murky saga of secrets, investigation, and trust. Bradley woke before dawn. The manuscript of his investigation sprawled across the mahogany desk, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee curling through the quiet house. His mind raced with the revelations he'd unearthed, Martin's unwitting but perilous entanglement with a commission under criminal suspicion, the clandestine wire transfers funneled through shell corporations, and the question that haunted him still: could he trust the woman he'd vowed to protect? He knew that to move forward, he needed allies. The first call went to Evelyn Cho, an investigative journalist with a reputation for tenacity and integrity. Evelyn had broken several high-profile corporate scandals in the past, but she owed nothing to the Richardsons. If she agreed to help, it would be because the story was both airtight and urgent. Bradley drafted a concise outline of his findings: Project Orion's codenamed transfers, Luc Demaray's involvement, and Martin's journal confessions. He stressed the human element, the betrayal of trust in a marriage, and the danger of powerful firms abetting corrupt networks. When Evelyn returned his call, her voice was measured yet intrigued. "I'll need corroborating documents," she said, "and a safe way to communicate. If we're wrong, my career and yours could be destroyed." Bradley agreed to meet her at an off-the-grid cafe at lunchtime, codenamed The Elm, where no one knew him by sight. As he hung up, adrenaline and fear warred in his chest. This was no longer just an internal probe. It teetered on the brink of public exposure. Over the next hours, Bradley gathered every shred of evidence, scanned copies of Caribbean Commission dossiers, encrypted email threads he'd intercepted, hotel receipts in Martin's name with odd location coordinates, and the ledger entries labeled "Consulting Fee Project Orion." He loaded them onto a secure USB drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he dialed Martin's number. "Bradley," she answered, her tone wary. "You wanted to talk?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'm working with someone," he finally admitted. "We need external expertise to verify these documents. I know it's difficult, but I need you to trust me." Silence crackled over the line. I do," Martin whispered. "Just be careful. Whoever's behind this, they're dangerous." Their fragile alliance forged, Bradley set out for the Elm. He parked 2 blocks away, weaving through morning traffic on foot. When he entered the cafe, its dim lighting and mismatched furniture felt comforting in its anonymity. Evelyn sat near the back, laptop open, a stack of legal pads at her side. She eyed him coolly as he approached. He slid into the seat opposite her and placed the USB drive on the table. "Everything's here," he said. "But I need you to vet a cross-reference shipping manifests, trace the ultimate recipients of those transfers, and find out who really controls Meridian Holdings and Pacific Crest Solutions." Evelyn nodded, her fingers already dancing over the keyboard. As she worked, Bradley's thoughts drifted to worst-case scenarios: criminal indictments, government investigations, and the media circus that would inevitably follow. He worried most about Martin, her reputation, her safety, their marriage. If the Commission's traffickers realized she'd cooperated with him, would they target her? Could they use her as leverage to silence him? Evelyn looked up, her eyes sharp. "There's a pattern," she said, pointing at the screen. "Meridian Holdings shares directors with 2 arms manufacturing firms under U.S. sanctions. Pacific Crest Shell is registered at the same forwarding address as a private equity group linked to money laundering in Eastern Europe." She tapped a key. "And Luc Demaray's not just counsel. He's a known associate of a convicted arms broker named Viktor Ryazanov." Bradley's stomach dropped. So Martin was advising people tied to an international smuggling ring? Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "It appears so. But your wife's involvement seems unwitting. Her own notes call out discrepancies. She wanted to investigate further." She got in over her head, but she did intend to blow the whistle. That journal is her lifeline. Bradley exhaled, relief and dread mingling in his chest. We need to protect her, then expose the scheme before they figure out she's our source. Evelyn nodded. I'll draft a tentative expose and shop it to my editor. But we need airtight proof testimony from someone inside, bank records tracing the money to its final recipients, and perhaps a statement from Martin herself. They agreed on the next steps. Evelyn would leverage her network of whistleblower attorneys to secure protective measures. Bradley would obtain immunity guarantees for Martin. And together they'd coordinate a timed release of the story when government investigators were ready to act. Back at the Richardson estate that evening, Bradley found Martin in the library, poring over her old commission files. The soft lamplight illuminated her strained features. He sat beside her, the USB drive in hand. Evelyn confirms that these firms are fronts for trafficking networks, he said softly. But she also believes your journal proves your innocence and willingness to expose them. Tears welled in Martin's eyes. I started with the best intentions, she whispered. I thought I could shape policy for the better. I never imagined they'd be tied to weapons and illicit trade. Bradley took her hand. You have one chance to set this right. We'll work with Evelyn and the authorities. But you must testify and provide everything you have. Martin nodded, resolve replacing fear. I'll do it for us and for anyone harmed by their operations. Meanwhile, across town, word of Bradley's clandestine meeting reached Luc Desmarais through an encrypted tip to his private server. Luc, ever vigilant, sensed betrayal. He dispatched a discreet inquiry to Viktor Ryazanov's network, find out who the journalist is and who that American is cooperating with. Within hours, Bradley's license plate numbers, home address, and photo were circulating among shadowy operatives. That night, Bradley double-checked the deadbolts on his front door and installed a new encryption protocol on his phone. He texted Martin, "They're watching. Stay inside." She replied instantly, "Locked in. Love you." But safety proved fleeting. The next afternoon, a black SUV idled outside the estate gates. A courier handed a small package to Martin's assistant with instructions to deliver it personally. Inside the unmarked box lay a single object, a blood-soaked surgical glove and a note scrawled on torn commission stationery. Next time, keep your wife in line, she'll pay the price. Martin felt the chill of terror. Bradley's heart seized when she showed him the package. Their private nightmare had become global. Evelyn's expose was still days from publication, and government subpoenas had not yet secured Martin's testimony. They were exposed, vulnerable, and outnumbered. Desperate, Bradley reached out to an old mentor at the FBI, Agent Rosa Delgado. She had once trusted him implicitly. Perhaps she still would. He sent her an encrypted call request outlining the imminent threat. Within the hour, Delgado answered. "Bradley, are you in danger?" she asked without preamble. He relayed the syringe and the bloodied glove. "We'll file your wife as a witness under protective custody. We'll assign you a detail. But you need to hand over your dossier, every document, every file, every USB. We can't protect you without knowing what you have." Bradley agreed. As he disconnected, Delgado's voice echoed, "Stay in place. We're on our way." Moments later, federal agents in plain clothes surged through the estate's front hall, securing evidence and advising Martin to gather essential belongings. Bradley stood by her side as they led her downstairs to the waiting armored vehicle. He handed over the USB drive and his phone, the lifelines of his investigation. As the SUV's doors closed, Bradley realized the enormity of what lay ahead. Martin's testimony would bring down a network that stretched across continents, but it would also drag the Richardson name through the mud. Their family legacy hung in the balance. And while Martin would be protected under federal witness protocols, Bradley remained exposed, a single man standing against an army of corrupt oligarchs and ruthless traffickers. Late that night, alone in the now quiet estate, Bradley stared at the dark windows, listening for any sign of movement. He knew the story's public release was imminent. Evelyn had secured a primetime slot with a leading news network. But the question gnawed at him: would that be enough to save Martin? Or would their exposure provoke a violent backlash from the syndicate on the verge of collapse? In the silence, Bradley made a silent vow. Come what may, he would stand by Martin. He would rebuild their shattered trust, shield her from the coming storm, and see the conspiracy dismantled. Even if it meant sacrificing everything he had fought for, his loyalty would never waver. And somewhere, in the corridors of power and crime, the gears of justice and retribution began to turn, drawing Bradley and Martin into a final, perilous confrontation with forces that thrived on secrecy and which would stop at nothing to preserve their empire.